Yes.
For instance, it seems to me the people I know who are becoming aware of Huna more often are comparing it to the ancient Egyptian.
Egyptian what?
I was going to say religion, but understanding.
Okay. Again, it's Huna has nothing to do with religion. You can find those ideas.
Neither did they, the ancient Egyptians. So one of the questions asked of this Egyptian channel was, did you worship blah, blah, blah? And he said, we didn't worship anything. Those were symbols of...
Okay. Well, of course, when you get into channeled information, you get into a wide variety of differences between channels, because that information has to come through someone, and it may be very good stuff. Of course, in Huna, you would look at see how effective it is. Is it useful? And that would determine how good it is. But it's not like something that you can verify through several sources, usually. Okay. When we talk about, when I was talking about before about finding Huna all around the world, all you have to do is study the esoteric traditions and many of the religions from all around the world, see what they have said and are saying that's available to everybody, and you will find all these ideas. Even in the Gospels, for instance, these 7 principles that I mentioned of Huna, Jesus says every one of them. Okay? And we find it in Buddhism, and we find it in shamanism in Siberia, and we find it all over the place. Okay? So these ideas are there and shared. Worship now, that brings up something very interesting. Because the whole concept of worship is cultural. And it really, we don't always understand what people mean when we use the word worship in English. Okay? Because, for instance, history of Chinese religion in English talks about how they worshipped all kinds of gods. Well, strange concept, because the Chinese of the ancient times would ask these so-called gods to do things, and if they didn't come forth, they'd throw them in the river or burn them. Okay? That's not really the way we think of something as worship that you don't dare touch, and you know that in the West come down in the kind of a Western tradition. When the missionaries came here to Hawaii, and they were trying to put Hawaiian into a dictionary and do some translations. Well, of course, one of the words that came up was worship. And when the missionaries explained to the chiefs and the kahunas that they were talking with what they meant by worship, so they could get a translation, well, the answer said worship. Oh, that's ho'omana. And so ever since then, the word in the dictionary for worship has been ho'omana. And there are even Western religions now, when they translate their name into Hawaiian, it says ho'omana this and ho'omana that. Ho'omana means to give away power. Okay? To transfer power. And very interesting, because recently I was giving a course on this knowledge in France. And we were talking about, and the word for worship came up to be translated. And in French, it is vénérer. Well, then that started me thinking, this is not at all like the word in English. Because in French, that word only means to venerate. And it's the identical word you would use for your parents, as you would use for God. It means to venerate. It doesn't mean to give all your power to it. But in English, it does. It means to, has a different kind of a connotation. Well, in Hawaiian, the usual way of dealing with this whole concept was not really in the Western sense. It was really more in the French. It was not in the Western English sense. It was much more in the French sense. It was to venerate. Okay? And they weren't really thought of as gods as we understand them in the English tradition or Greek tradition or thing like that, they were really, a better word is archetypes for the highest ones, or simply spirits of nature, the forces of nature, that were considered to be alive, not, so you would speak to the wind, or you would speak to the rain, and you would ask it for favors, and for some of them there wouldn't be an offering. For the archetypes, there would be what we would call an offering, but that's not really the Hawaiian sense of it. It's more like a sharing. For instance, if food was given as an offering, the prayer that went along with that would say, here's food. Yours is the spiritual part, ours is the material part. And then they'd sit down and eat it. Okay? The fragrance, which is symbolically spiritual, was for the spirit. And the material stuff they ate. They would never leave stuff around to rot. Very un-Hawaiian. Okay? They would put it out and say, hey, this is for you and this is for us. Let's have a meal together. Okay? So it was more of a party.